Hello, I'm Nima Rajan and welcome to Northwest Newsweek. Thunder Bay OPP have released the names of the 2 people killed in a 3-vehicle pileup on Highway 1117 near Pearl on Monday evening. The collision happened shortly after 6 o'clock when an eastbound SUV attempted to make a left turn into a rest stop. The SUV was struck from behind by a tractor-trailer unit, and the impact of the collision sent it into the path of a westbound pickup truck. Both occupants of the SUV were declared dead at the scene, and they've been identified as 61-year-old Joanne Mendewagan of Thunder Bay and 46-year-old Christopher Towagishig of Greenstone. The 4 people in the pickup truck were all taken to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, while the driver of the transport was uninjured. The transport operator has been charged with careless driving. The collision forced the closure of the highway for about 8 hours. Steady progress continues to be made in implementing recommendations from the 7 Youth Inquest. That was the message delivered on Wednesday by lawyers representing the families of 7 young people who lost their lives in Thunder Bay between 2000 and 2011. But while much has been done, there are still many issues that still must be addressed, and the families are concerned that progress on those issues might soon stall. Alana Pickrell reports.
Steady improvement has been made by all of the parties involved when it comes to the 145 recommendations that came out of the 7 Youth Inquest. Canada jumped up from a C+ to a B+, Ontario went up from a B- to a B+, and the highest grade was accomplished by Dennis Franklin Cromarty High School, who stayed steady with an A+ score. Jonathan Rudin, Program Director for the Aboriginal Legal Services, says there really seems to be a will to move forward, and he is feeling good about the progress so far.
In the first year, 15% of the recommendations were done. In the second year, 49%. Now, 57%.
The recommendations come following the 7 Indigenous youth deaths that took place between 2000 and 2011. The overall grade has jumped up to an A-, coming up from a C+ in 2017 and a B+ in 2018. Caitlin Casper, one of the lawyers representing 6 of the 7 families, says the progress has been welcomed by those affected.
So I think that there was initially some hesitation and concern from the families as to whether or not those recommendations were going to be taken seriously. And I think as we've shown over the years, this has been a real progression.
The only party that didn't receive a grade is the Thunder Bay Police Service, which will not be graded until the OIPRD recommendations have been completed. Although the newest report card brought good news, a lot more work still needs to be done.
We've been able to maintain the work through pots of funding that we found, but I think both the provincial and federal government need to work harder at ensuring that we have some core funding.
The government's involvement and commitment wasn't only a concern for Anishinaabe Nation. Rudin also commented on the government's role moving forward.
If people aren't committed, and particularly the Canadian and Ontario governments aren't committed to help, then the overall grade might drop. So I would like to say that the grades will only go up, but I think it's going to be a challenge to get the grades much higher.
Rudin adds that some of the 145 recommendations will never be addressed. He says they were directed at organizations who feel it's just not their responsibility. Alana Pickrell, TBT News.
A 28-year-old inmate who briefly escaped from a Manitoba prison on Wednesday has now been found. Ringo Dylan Carpenter has been serving an 8-year sentence for manslaughter in connection to the death of a 21-year-old Langford Ogama back in 2012. He began serving the sentence 2 years later. Early Wednesday morning, staff at Stony Mountain Penitentiary in Manitoba discovered that Carpenter was missing during morning counts. A manhunt ensued, and the Winnipeg Police Service apprehended Carpenter at around 1 o'clock in the afternoon local time. Corrections Canada says it's conducting an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the escape. Former MP Bruce Heyer has a chance to recapture the seat in Parliament that he held for 7 years. Heyer will represent the Green Party in Thunder Bay Superior North in the upcoming federal election. He easily defeated Scriber councillor Kim Krause, earning 73% of the vote from local party members in an online vote. Heyer says he's disappointed with the performance of the Liberals over the last 4 years, particularly when it comes to climate change. He believes, however, that Canadians will ultimately elect a minority Liberal government in the fall and that he can represent the riding well under that scenario.
Minority governments can be extremely effective. Absolute power leads to absolute arrogance and sometimes corruption as well. So I'm looking forward to working in a minority government. I passed several important bills, including the climate change bill, in a conservative minority government, but I got the Liberals to vote with me.
That bill was ultimately struck down by a conservative-controlled Senate in 2010. Higher's priority this time around include economic development, electoral reform, and of course taking action to combat climate change. No injuries have been reported following a weekend shooting incident on the Shoal Lake First Nation. It happened on Sunday when an undisclosed number of shots were directed at a home on the reserve. An investigation resulted in Treaty 3 police issuing an alert for a male suspect and a vehicle. Police say a suspect was later taken into custody by RCMP following a collision near Falcon Lake, Manitoba. Treaty 3 police say 21-year-old Shane Dyke of Falcon Lake, Manitoba is facing a total of 10 criminal charges, and additional charges are expected. A Kenora woman has been released from hospital after being struck by an all-terrain vehicle in a city park early Sunday morning. OPP were initially called to investigate several suspicious vehicles in Anishinaabe Park. Further investigation revealed that a woman, now identified as park manager Sue Evenden, had been hit by one of the ATVs and sustained non-life-threatening injuries. In a release Monday morning, Kenora OPP say they have identified the drivers of the ATV, 2 males and 1 female, and that the investigation is continuing. Well, some big mining news in the Dryden area as the federal government has announced the proposed Goliath Gold project is not likely to cause significant environmental effects and can proceed. The proposed mine, located northeast of Dryden, will start as an open pit before transitioning to an underground operation. It's expected to create about 750 jobs between construction and operations over its lifespan of 12 to 13 years. The announcement by Federal Environment Minister Catherine McKenna means that the developer, Treasury Metals, can now begin obtaining permits and other authorizations from federal departments. The statement by the minister also sets out 144 conditions that the company must adhere to, which aim to protect human health, fish and fish habitat, migratory birds, and the lands used by Indigenous peoples. The city of Dryden is considering joining other municipalities in the Northwest by adding a municipal accommodation tax for those staying at hotels in the community. It's expected to bring in several $100,000 of additional revenue for the city, which was another topic at council. Will the city of Dryden continue to exist? Adam Riley reports.
In 2017, the province passed Bill 127, which gave municipalities the authority to levy an accommodation tax, opening up new streams of revenue for towns and cities. Now, after initially passing on the MAT, the city of Dryden is taking a second look at tapping into that opportunity, which CAO Roger Nesbitt says is estimated to be a sizable amount.
Preliminary estimates show a possible revenue stream of around $400,000 a year. The proposal from the city right now is to use an existing tourism entity within the municipal boundaries.
The money would be split 50-50 between the tourism entity and the city, leaving $200,000 of what Deputy Mayor Martin McKinnon calls found money that the city can use to invest in several different departments.
We've had some councillors question whether or not it can be used for supporting the youth center or the wellness committee. So those are things council has to haggle out yet. There's a need to also in our community to prop up some of the recreation things that are going on.
McKinnon adds with federal and provincial funding applications, $200,000 can become a substantially larger amount. Council is also looking at reverting back to the town of Dryden after a suggestion by Mayor Greg Wilson. In 2000, when Barclay Township was amalgamated, Dryden rebranded itself as a city. Wilson says when Dryden became a city, it seemed more like a publicity grab and thinks it's a good idea to walk humbly.
When you think about a city versus a town, we're not really a city. We're more of a town, and we actually promote our community based on a lot of the benefits that you find in towns. Ease of access, quick to get out to the lake or out in the bush to get to your summer camp.
In addition to reverting back to the town of Dryden, Wilson is also proposing a name change for Colonization Avenue to Lugli Avenue in honor of Mark and Jacob Lugli, a father and son from Dryden who were tragically killed in a collision last month in Manitoba.
the fact that it comes right up to Parkdale, where the school is, the St. Joseph School, where Mark taught and was principal, it seems to make sense that we do that. I think it would be honoring to the family.
But like rebranding the city to a town, Wilson wants to see what the financial cost would be to rename Colonization Avenue. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Coming up after the break, it's been less than a year, but it appears a proposed industrial site near Red Rock is almost ready to begin operations. Northwestern Ontario residents have enjoyed an unusually warm and sunny summer, but the favorable weather conditions have come at a price. MNR officials say that the warm weather has helped lead to an uptick in forest fire activity across the region. Ian Kaufman has the details.
Overall, Ontario has seen fewer but several more serious forest fires this year, according to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. The ministry has recorded 455 fires in total so far. That's less than half the number of fires recorded at this time last year. But those fires have been more damaging. The total area burned is about the same as last year at around 265,000 hectares. That's nearly double the province's 10-year average. And while the Northwest region has accounted for just over half the total number of fires, nearly all of the area burned, about 98%, has been here in the Northwest. With over 260,000 hectares having been consumed by fire, the Northwest has already surpassed the total number burned during last year's fire season. Much of that damage came from several large fires in the Red Lake area in June and July. The fire season officially runs until October 31st. Ian Kaufman, TBT News.
Last September, residents and civic leaders gathered in the Red Rock region to hear from a company called Certarus, which proposed to build a compressed natural gas facility in the community. Less than a year later, the plant is looking less like a proposal and more like a sure thing. Once operational, the facility will tap into the natural gas line, compress the gas, then transport it in an industrial user. There will be 2 locations in Ontario, with Red Rocks being the furthest west. Mayor Gray Nelson is happy to see the industry return to the town, and with it, just over a half a dozen permanent jobs.
We had a meeting with them upstairs here about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And they're very close. I could see out there that getting started up. They've got most of the groundwork done. They said they found more cars and railroad ties in that land that they dug up out there, but they spent a lot of money. Now they're going to put fencing all around the area, so I don't think it's too far down the road it'll be in operation.
Nelson doesn't know exactly when the plant will be operational, but during last year's presentation, company representatives expected the facility to be online sometime in 2019. Ignace residents were out in full force last week for an open house held by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry regarding Ag-Imac Lake. For years, several residents have had issues with water levels and erosion of property, which for some reason is getting out of hand. And as Adam Riley reports, some are looking at the future of the dam, which plays a key role in maintaining those water levels.
The Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry is looking for input from Ignace residents regarding water levels on Ag-Imac Lake. Kelvin Davenport is with the MNRF. He says the public consultations are part of a regulatory water study, which was last completed in 1975. He adds it's a tricky situation to meet the wants and needs of those who live alongside the lake.
What we're hearing is there's some residents along the lake want to keep the lake level the way it is because they're happy. Obviously, some of the folks that are experiencing some of the damage, they would like to see water levels lowered. And we also have some individuals, depending on where they are in the lake, would also like to see the lake level raised, so they can better have boat access and stuff like that.
One of those residents who wants to see the lake levels lowered is Wanda Pitcher. She spent $18,000 over the last 15 years trying to protect her property from being washed away by the lake.
And the answer is not for the people to keep putting in retaining walls and that type of thing. We want our beaches back. We want it back to the way it was in the 60s and the 70s. This has been a gradual process. It's not something that happened overnight.
Part of the discussion involves the dam located in the north end of Ag-Imac, which regulates the flow of water out of the lake. Davenport says there is a minimum flow level which is required for the town's water treatment plant. Also in attendance was Ignace Mayor Donald Cunningham. He welcomes the open house and is appreciative that the MNRF and its consultants are available to answer questions.
I think it's important that people take advantage of that part of it, and as a town, likewise, we go to the events as well, and to try to find out exactly what all the concerns and possibly what whether it's M&R or anybody else can offer to help this out.
When asked if another open house would be taking place, Davenport says he isn't quite sure. But because Ag-Imac Lake has so many seasonal residents and the need by the ministry to get as much public input as possible, he hinted it could be sometime next summer. Adam Riley, TBT News.
The town of Ignace was on the receiving end of some federal funding last week, which is aimed at spurring economic development. Kenora MP Bob Nolt delivered the good news to Mayor Donald Cunningham and members of the community. The $95,000 is coming from FedNor and in conjunction with the similar amount announced last year by area MPP Greg Rickford will be used to provide resources for the town as it prepares for the potential boom. Cunningham calls the investments from both the federal and provincial governments a vote of confidence in Ignace and its future.
With helping us further our master plan for the future of Ignace to identify what needs to be done and how to be done, and then moving forward to how to implement it so that we can we're ready for future development, which we know it's going to happen here.
Cunningham adds that there has been significant investment in the communities at the local level within the last year, which also serves as a boost of confidence. A 22-year-old Thunder Bay man faces a number of charges after he allegedly rammed two police cruisers in Nipigon with a stolen truck. OPP were called at around 9:45 in the evening by a member of the public who advised police that the vehicle had been stolen from their driveway. Officers located the truck about 5 minutes later in a residential area, but the driver wouldn't stop. Police then contained the area and deployed a spike belt, and while two of the truck's tires were punctured, the incident didn't end there. The man kept driving on the flat tires at a high rate of speed, ramming a pair of police vehicles before getting stuck in a ditch. The man then managed to flee the scene on foot before officers found and arrested him a short time later, thanks to a tip from nearby residents. The accused has been charged with a number of offenses, including theft of a vehicle, dangerous operation of a vehicle, impaired driving, and fleeing police. He's been remanded into custody at the Thunder Bay Jail. Coming up next, recent infrastructure investments by the province in correction centres in the Northwest have renewed hopes that Fort Frances will soon become in line with other facilities in the province. The announcement earlier this year that Thunder Bay would be getting a new district jail has the president of the union representing corrections officers in Fort Frances hoping that the facility will be brought up to provincial standards. And as Adam Riley reports, to meet those standards, a serious expansion of the jail is required.
We're not necessarily looking for a new facility. We realize that might be a bit of a pipe dream, but there are a lot of infrastructural upgrades that need to be had.
The Fort Frances Jail has been in service since 1907, making the 112-year-old facility one of the oldest of its kind here in the Northwest. It's also the smallest of the region's 3 district jails, with a capacity of 23 beds. Tom Kenny is a corrections officer at the jail and the president of OPSEU 708. He says the jail requires some much-needed infrastructure work to bring it in line with the rest of the province, such as the installation of a full-body scanner.
The ministry mandated these a few years ago into every institution in the province, and for whatever reason, it has not made its way to Fort Frances yet.
Kenny understands a brand new facility is unlikely, but says a physical expansion of the building is needed to accommodate for the scanners. A possible space for that expansion could be the OPP detachment located next door, which is set to be vacated in 2020 after construction of a new detachment is completed. Earlier this year, after attending the groundbreaking of the new detachment, Solicitor General Sylvia Jones toured the Fort Frances Jail, which Kenny says was an eye-opening experience for the minister, and he made sure to inform the minister of the building's infrastructure needs.
We were very pleased that she did come for a tour of the place, and we definitely appreciated it. We voiced our concerns. We made it known as well to her that, you know, what we're looking for is nothing up and above anything that's already out there. We're just looking to be brought up to like current ministry, standards.
In March, the province announced that infrastructure upgrades would be coming to the Kenora Jail, and in May, Jones announced that Thunder Bay would be getting a brand new facility to replace the aging district jail, which gives Kenny some optimism that improvements could come to Fort Frances. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Part of the Northwest's shared border with the United States contains hundreds of lakes and rivers and a provincial park. Since the last presidential election, a group in the United States called Campaign to Save the Boundary Waters has been speaking out against several proposed mining developments in the region, one of which is a copper mine, the pollution and effluent of which would flow into the border waters. Last week, Fort Frances Councillor Douglas Judson invited members from Save the Boundary Waters to the community to speak to local residents and let them know what they can do.
Have some connection to our shared waterways, whether it's for recreation, whether it's because we're from an Indigenous community that has long been part of that territory, or because our industry or our business is connected to nature. So it's important to us to protect that watershed, and I want to make sure that our community has the tools and the information to do so.
And that'll do it for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. Be sure to tune in next week for a brand new episode. I'm Nima Rajan, and have a great weekend, everyone. Take care.